How are you, ma'am?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Good.
Hey, don't worry about what I do. You are right.
Hey, let's take a look.
No, you may not know.
I want to make sure you got it. Because I just did a last minute change.
PowerPoint.
We're good. We're good.
If I send it,
Yeah.
I'm going to try not
Which item is it?
the last, or the second to the last one. It's the one, the MCDC stuff.
Oh, gotcha.
I'm going to present it.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
I'll send it to you. I'm going to try not to. Maybe at that point.
Okay. Well, go ahead and send it to me and I'll have it minimized. Wait, I don't have my email on this computer. Hey, can you oh, that's...
I don't think it's
Do I? I'm not the one standing at the podium.
There's no email.
I don't have my email. Send it to me here. And they'll just have to wait a minute while I make the transfer. They won't. I'll go ahead and do it.
Okay.
That's what I hate about this is I can't black the screen. Hopefully when we get this new stuff, I can do it.
They don't have monitors, do
They decided they wasn't going to run.
Hey, Mike, how are you? Good.
Why isn't it downloading?
Don't worry about it.
Try one. Let me try one. It's not that big of a file. There it is. Okay.
Thank you. Hey, you use GoodReader on your Surface?
Do I what?
You use GoodReader on your Surface?
No.
Now, what do you do when you read? How do you read this?
I jump into
Just a PDF reader? Oh, wow.
or you can get on the website and read it. You don't have to go through Goodreader.
Goodreader's pretty good.
It's not bad, yeah.
Good evening and welcome to the Midlothian City Council meeting. It's now about 1 minute until 6, and I'll call this meeting to order. A quorum of council is present. And our first item of business is our invocation and our pledge, and I've asked Council Member Kaufman if he would lead us in that.
Let's pray. Father, on this day, September the 11th, 2018, we remember those that lost it all. God, we take a moment to acknowledge the sacrifice of all the first responders that went in that day, and we thank you for their selfless service. God, I thank you for our first responders that we have here in this city, and I pray a hedge of protection around our police and our fire departments in Midlothian, Texas. God, we thank you for this city. God, help us tonight to make good decisions that reflect you in all that we say and all that we do. Lord, we thank you for this city and this town and our citizens. It's in Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. On the Texas flag, I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you. Our next item of business is 2018-306, Fire Department 9/11 Remembrance. Chief Counselor's going to handle that.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I thought it'd be appropriate that we start with a picture that kind of remember the day, the morning of September the 11th, 2001. And it's easy as we look at that picture to be drawn to the Twin Towers that rise above the lower Manhattan skyline and see the smoke billowing from them. What may be lost in the picture and not as noticeable is the ladder truck going across the Brooklyn Bridge. That's ladder 118, responding to the calls that day. None of the crew on that truck came home. That was their final call. So I thought it would be nice tonight if we just kind of refreshed our memories a little bit about that particular day and remember a little bit about how it may have impacted us. And especially for those who are so young today that don't really even remember it. So around this time, about 17 years ago, most of us in this room were still reeling from the events that had transpired early on the morning of September the 11th, 2001. The images of that day are etched in our memories as we watched the North Tower in Lower Manhattan billowing smoke from the upper floors, while the second plane pierced the South Tower, erupting into a ball of flames. Then there is the gaping hole in the side of the Pentagon, or the hole in the ground in a Pennsylvania field where the last hijacked plane came to rest. Each one of us will forever remember something from that day that made our emotions boil, our heart hurt, or wonder what tomorrow would bring. I distinctly remember holding my 6-week-old son on the morning of September the 11th, 2001, watching the events on TV as the South Tower began to collapse on itself. As the dust and ashes consumed the view of the camera, I began to hear the alert devices alarming on the air packs that the firefighters were wearing that day, indicating that they were not moving. The sound to me was deafening as I verbally yelled at the TV for the firefighters to get up. On that day, 2,977 people died and over 6,000 were injured. Firefighters, law enforcement officers, EMS providers, doctors, nurses, city workers, and civilians rushed to the scene that day to attempt to bring calmness to chaos. Some gave a lot, some gave it all. 343 firefighters and 71 law enforcement officers, along with 2,563 civilians, were lost that day. Out of the ashes that day rose an American spirit of sacrifice and servitude. Phrases such as "let's roll" or "never forget" became common sayings that we all will understand. People like Pat Tillman gave up careers because they believed in something, even if it meant sacrificing everything. Standing up for our country and not kneeling. During my life, Ted McPherson plays Amazing Grace on the bagpipe. That we're given, and I hope that we never forget. Thank you very much.
Dale, it must be noted that we're losing first responders today because of them charging onto that pile, looking and rescuing and breathing carcinogens. We're losing. We've lost more first responders since 9/11 than we lost on 9/11.
That is correct. The numbers I saw today that they estimate 1,400 first responders have died since then because of their exposures to the carcinogens, dust, things that were produced that day because of the collapses. That is correct. As well as civilians in the area that lived and worked in the lower Manhattan section. So thousands of people are still being affected. Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave.
Thanks, Dale.
We'll move to 2018-307. I have two people that put down 318 that they wanted to speak, and those are non-speaking, so I want to allow you to speak right now. Mungie.
Is that Nicholas?
How about Robert Shelton?
You speaking out for the tax thing?
Yes, the item that you put on there is not a speaking thing, so I'm gonna give you the opportunity now to speak.
Robert Shelton, 3450 Skinner Road, Midlothian. I don't sound like a broken record. I've been up here before. All I'd like to ask is that when it comes time to vote on the tax rate, that you just keep in mind that all those that were annexed that are paying the monies that they weren't expecting to have to pay. And some it was a hardship. And I know it's been spoken, well, if we dropped it one penny, it might be only $25 per person. And I think myself, I would, even though it's only $25, it would be meaning that you as a council do care about your citizens, and even if it's only $25 a year, it's an act showing compassion for people that were forced into annexation, those that have a hardship for those taxes, even if it's only 1 penny, 2 pennies. It would be an act of showing that you care about the citizens.
Thank you.
Is it Nicholas Munini? Is that correct? It's not marked whether you're speaking or not speaking. You're not speaking? Okay.
All right, thank you. Our next item of business is the consent agenda. All matters listed under the consent agenda are considered to be routine by the City Council and will be enacted by one motion without separate discussion. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. Do I have any questions? Motion?
Second.
I have a motion and a second for approval. Record your votes, please. And just pass 7-0. We'll move to 2018-313. Conduct a public hearing and consider an act upon an ordinance amending the City of Midlothian zoning ordinance by adopting a combination concept plan and development site plan, including building elevations, landscape plan for a 30.07 plus or minus acre portion of the property within Planned Development District number 113.
Thanks, sir. The proposed planned development district is for PD 113, also known as the Memphis Health Systems Hospital. At the time when this PD was originally approved, there was not a site plan or elevations that accompanied the PD. As part of the PD language, the ordinance language, we required that at the time of development or the time of site plan submittal, that they be required to go through a public hearing process. As part of that process, they're back here today to amend, and they want to go ahead and show the proposed site plan, elevations, landscape plan, as part of the requirements in the original ordinance. So that the rest of the text in the original ordinance stayed the same. So the only change is adding these exhibits onto the actual ordinance itself. As you can see, this is the site plan for the Memphis Hospital. The hospital will be located in the center. Along the perimeter of 287, there's a landscape. There's landscape buffer. There's a pond where at a future time the applicant requests they would like to possibly request a well be situated in that location for a possible water feature there. The site plan shows all parking. This site plan also shows a future medical office building. At this time, they have not provided elevations, but once again, once elevations are provided as part of the ordinance, it will be required to go as a regular agenda item, the elevations, before the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council for final approval. So anything that you don't see tonight will be brought forward prior to any construction. Once the proposed elevations do meet and go above our minimum landscape requirements as set forth in the zoning ordinance as well as the PD language. The actual elevations of the building, they're using a mixture of masonry product, brick, stone. They're using glazing. They're trying to use a lot of glass to open up the building because it is going to be present on along 287. They want to make a more opening building, more welcoming, kind of blend with the other designs that we have with a high development standard. There's various architectural elements that have been included in this elevation, going back and forth with them, that they're able to include in that. They added columns along the edges, some bump outs. They've added some glass work that you can see. You probably see a little better in your packets. They're showing the entire medical, the entire hospital. On the side, they have a covered parking area, which they provide elevations for, which is your standard covered parking that's going to be located in the rear of the hospital. So, covered parking is going to be located right being blocked by the hospital. Part of this process, as we've done with many PDs and many other developments, we've tried to have it incorporated in the rest of the city regarding walking trails. They've connected their sidewalks to other paths of the city where we're currently putting in sidewalks, so that trail system can continue on even through the hospital development. They have avoided any areas of critical matter, so it won't affect their critical services. And on this building, all signage will meet our sign regulation. The only sign exemptions that they have written in this ordinance as part of the elevations are the emergency signage that are required for ambulances, helipad, medical services. The proposed elevations, landscape plan, development site plan that you have in front of you. This does require a public hearing. We did sound out notice to all property owners within 200 feet. 0 came back in favor, 0 came back in opposition. And I can answer any questions at this time by search for them.
Yeah. And it does pass 70. Are there any other questions, motions?
Approve is presented there.
I have a motion for approval and a second. Record your votes. And it does pass 7-0. Thank you. It's an awesome looking building, and we're happy to have it here, for sure. We'll move to 2018-314, conduct a public hearing and consider an act upon an ordinance granting a specific use permit to allow for the use of a gasoline station with retail sales relating to development and use of 0.8995 plus or minus acres out of the William Hawkins Survey, abstract number 465, and the Benjamin F. Hawkins Survey, abstract number 464, generally located to the north of Business 287 or East Main Street between North Midlothian Parkway and Murray Street.
Thank you. This is located next to Walgreens off of Main Street, Midlothian Parkway, directly across from Brookshire Grocery Store. The proposed applicant, 7-Eleven, is requesting a second location within our city limits. Kind of similar to the previous 7-Eleven that was approved last year. This is required to have a specific use permit for a gasoline station and convenience store. The maximum square footage of the store is going to be very similar to the other one, 3,200 square feet. However, when this one came before us, as we all know, we really try to bring higher scale of development. We did go to them and we told them we want to see something different. Something that we could possibly improve on the last design. We went back and forth with them, and we feel like we have a building, site plan elevations that help correlate to the surrounding area. The Brookshire design using a combination of different materials within it. The site does meet all parking ratio requirements. As a separate instrument, a future cross-access easement will have to be granted through separate instrument, which will be part of the platting and development process as it comes through. Kind of showing you on the landscape, we meet all the landscape requirements. Kind of the difference between this site and the previous site on 663 is that this is not abutting any residential zoned property or properties being used for residential property. So they're not required to have that masonry wall behind them. It's zoned industrial. Surrounding them, it's zoned industrial, and across the street, it's all commercial. So that's why you won't see any sort of masonry wall right there. On the side, there's an existing billboard sign that's been there for quite a few years. As part of the signage, we're requiring that to be removed as part of their overall sign package. Kind of some of the design elements that we, and architectural elements, we wanted them to try to blend in with using various elements. They're using brick and stone as the majority of it. They're also using stucco as Brookshire across the street is using on their building to throw different accents. But instead of using stucco as a primary building material, they're using more to accent the building itself. They've included arches, as you can see with meticulous brickwork around that, kind of jet out. It's some, using that for vertical articulation. They're using cornices, covering up on top. The previous 7-Eleven had on the awning in front is straight. They curved that, and on this one, they're using up-down lighting, so more enhanced lighting for the site. And they really want this to pop out and kind of blend in with these high development standards that we do have. This does meet all of our design requirements, meets all of our sign requirements, having them meet our current sign ordinance, limiting the window signage to 10%. And here's where the signage placement will be. Proposed signage does meet all the requirements as I previously stated for building wall signs, showing what the signage will look like. We were asked by the Planning and Zoning Commission if in those kind of gaps right here, if they'll ever place signage. We actually have preventing any future signage for here, so they can keep these architectural features right here and keep that free. Staff does recommend approval of the proposed specific use permit. This does require a public hearing. This will be before Planning and Zoning Commission. On the August 21st meeting, they recommended approval 6-0, and this does require a public hearing. I'll answer any questions at this time.
Any questions?
Close public hearing.
Well, is there anyone that wishes to speak on this, because it is a public hearing? Okay, I have a motion to close public hearing.
Second.
And a second. And it does pass 7-0. Any questions, recommendations?
I just had a quick question. I didn't quite understand the reason for the turning off of Main Street so far to the left.
What are you talking about?
Talking about that way over there on the left. What is that?
That matches up with the Brookshire location, or the Brookshire entrance for safety purposes. We're requesting that. However, they currently have 2 additional entrances right here that we're asking them to remove. That's part of that. So we're shifting one of those further east because those don't line up with the Brookshire development.
Is that their property?
This is the developer owns the surrounding property. That's part of this.
And then the other question I had was, I don't know the nuances, but often we will mail out letters explaining what's going to happen. Did you get anything back?
0 Quebec favor, 0 Quebec in opposition. A total of 5 notification letters were sent out.
Okay.
Move approval.
I have a motion for approval. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Record your votes, please. And it does pass 7-0. We'll move to 2018-315, conduct a public hearing and consider an act upon an ordinance to rezone lots 3 and 4, block 37, original town, from residential 3 district to urban village development district number 115 for professional office uses. The property is located at 209 South 5th Street.
Thank you. This proposed zoning, as you stated, is proposing from residential 3 district to urban village plan development district. Similar to prior zoning cases that we've heard, the property just located to the north is also zoned urban village plan development for professional office uses and beauty salon uses only. The proposed case that you have before you at this time, we have limited to professional offices, office uses only. Very similar to what we have been to really limit the impact that these developments will have on the downtown area, these older neighborhoods. The site does require 5 parking spaces. One of those have to be van accessible to meet ADA requirements. All parking will be located on the site, and they do meet those parking requirements. With this property, we are requiring similar fencing as you've seen, board on board, either redwood cedar fence, abutting the residential property to the south. The property to the north, we're not requiring fencing because that's the existing urban village plan development for professional offices, beauty salons, similar uses do not require any kind of screening or buffering. In the rear is an alley not being used. There's existing bushes, vegetation. There we're requiring that to be maintained along the alley, and no additional screening on the alley. Start that. They are planning on a very small sign on the property, as you've seen in other UPs, very small in nature, historical looking. That you'll see as part of. In the top left-hand corner, you can see that hang down sign. You've seen other developments, kind of going with the feel of the whole urban village downtown design. They do not plan on demolishing this building. They just plan on cleaning it up and using it for those professional office uses. Part of this development also we're requiring that upon prior to CFO or any further work being done, that a minor plat be done to combine those 2 lots, clean up the legal description, because currently it's lot 3 and 4, and they have a building that's built right on top of those lot lines, which they would agree to go ahead and do. Staff does recommend approval. This went before the Planning and Zoning Commission on August 21st. That was approved 6-0 by the Planning and Zoning Commission. We sent out notice to all property owners within 200 feet, as required by state law. 0 came back in favor, 0 came back in opposition. The total number of letters we sent out were 13. And once again, public hearing is required, and I can answer any questions at this time.
Actually, is this next door to the house that's been renovated just recently that improved the beauty shop and all of that?
Yes.
Is that right next door to it?
It's the beauty salon is PD 101, located right here just in north, and this is the subject property.
So you're saying that they're going to own both of it and they can?
No, so actually this property right here is actually 2 lots, lots 3 and 4, which cuts the building in half. And so generally, under zoning and subdivision regulations, you can't build over lot lines. They do plan on putting a ramp and fixing the carport, and to really clean up that, we're going to require them to just combine those 2 lots, which is an administrative process.
So what kind of a business are they? Did you say it would be included in that? It's going to be a hairdresser salon or what?
No. So this location is only for professional office only. I believe. Let's see the applicant. Maybe they are here. Oh, right there in the back. Sorry. They can answer exactly what they plan on doing at this location. I believe it's a real estate office. The property to the north, that's a UPD, is a beauty salon and professional office. But this side is strictly only professional
And
office.
you've got 5 parking spots?
Yes, sir. Meeting our minimum parking requirements.
And I'm assuming we have within the verbiage, it's going to apply for business purpose that's not typically going to exceed, 5 parking spots is not. If
Right.
you've got typically a business like that's going to have at least probably 3 parking spots consumed by office staff in some cases. So,
right, for the professional office use in our parking matrix, when we do the square footage of the building, it comes out to the 5 parking spaces. So they do meet that requirement.
Okay. We do reference that in the actual ordinance.
Is the handicap one of those 5?
Yes, those count as part of the 5 required parking spaces.
Any other questions? This is a public hearing. Is there anyone that wishes to speak on this? I have a motion and a second to close public hearing. Record your votes, please. And it does pass 7-0. Any other questions or motions? I have a motion for approval. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
And a second. Record your votes, please. And it does pass 7-0. We'll move to 2018-316, conduct a public hearing regarding the proposed fiscal year 2018-2019 annual operating budgets for the city of Midlothian. Ms. Ann Hunter present this. Thank you.
Well, yes, Mayor, this is a public hearing. It's the last public hearing that we have on the annual operating budget. I'll just remind everyone that we have had several meetings with council. Those began on July 24th, where we proposed the budget to council originally. We had budget workshops on July 27th, July 31st, and on August the 3rd. We proposed the tax rate for the first time on August 14th. And on August the 28th, we had the first public hearing on the annual operating budget and also on the tax rate. And on September 4th, we had the second public hearing on the proposed tax rate. In compliance with the Local Government Code 102.006, this public hearing provides an opportunity to communicate with interested persons regarding the proposed budgets before adoption. The notice was published in the Midlothian Mirror on August 14th and August 30th, and it's currently posted on the city's website. Again, I know we talked about it a number of times this summer, but our ad valorem tax rate is proposed at .708244 total, with maintenance and operations at .381223, and our debt service, or INS, is proposed at .327021. That will generate a net $14,085,479 at an assumed 100% collection rate for maintenance operation and $12,082,807 for debt service. This particular item is just a public hearing, so there is no official action to be taken on that.
Okay.
We just need to open the public hearing.
Any questions? And this is a public hearing, and I do have one speaker, Tiffany Karen. And this, as you well know, is just 3 minutes.
Yep. And y'all know my address at this point, right?
Yes. Yes.
Just want to make sure. So I just want to take this last opportunity. I've talked to several of y'all. Y'all all know how I stand on this, but I mean, this is the vote tonight. So one of the things I wanted to point out was if we dropped it 1 cent, what was it that was said that we would lose in revenue? Ish.
That's about 370,000.
370,000. And I've heard it said that if we dropped it a penny, or if we dropped it 2.5 pennies, that that would mean that we wouldn't be hiring new police officers. However, or the new ones. We had 19, I think was said 19 new positions, 17 new positions, something like that. 18, including a new police officer, clerk, sergeant, etc., etc. But I didn't hear anybody say anything about the $926,000 even being an option to be cut that was going to go to the ISD to split the athletic fields. I realized it sounds like a great deal, and at first, when I first thought, I was like, oh yes, this is amazing. But we're talking about cutting police officers before cutting a Champaign soccer field at the middle school. And I think that shows priority in our spending, and maybe misplaced priority, especially when you do the math on how much time we'll actually get to spend there. We're splitting it 50-50, getting to spend less than 50% of the time there once you subtract school hours.
That's a separate thing that was approved by the voters in 1998, I believe, and it's that it's a separate fund that is not part of the general fund.
It was coming out of the administration. It was on the administration supplemental.
It's down to 469 because of the
Split with the
4B.
But it was okay. So it's down to 400 and something thousand. So you said that we would lose less than that by dropping it a penny. So anyway, that's just my point. The first place that anybody goes when we talk about dropping any money out of the property tax rate is, oh, we won't have police officers, oh, you won't be safe, but not, oh, my kid might have to play on a less than competition grade field, or oh, the meter readers might not get a Prius versus an F-250 like the parks do, which by the way was twice the price. So yeah, I've gone down the list. I realize that it's tough. But I had some great interaction with Mr. Rogers, and I thought he had some great ideas about raising some permit rates to make up the difference, things like that. But I just wanted y'all to consider all of those things while you're going into this tonight.
Thank you. Thank you. Do we have any more questions, comments?
There's no action to be taken other than close the public hearing, right, Mayor?
Right, yes. I have a motion to close the public hearing. I have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. Record your votes, please. And it does pass 7-0. We'll go to 2018-317. Consider and act upon an ordinance by record vote to adopt the fiscal year 2018 and 2019 annual operating budget.
As the mayor read, this is a record vote that you will be taking. This budget process began in May with departments and the component units submitting their current level and their above service level funding requests to the finance department. We held departmental meetings between these before, so I won't go through them again, but we did have a number of meetings since July 24th, culminating into tonight. Just to run through them very quickly, the general fund budget appropriation is $32,905,910. The utility fund is $21,360,840. I'll note that one is not related to the tax rate. Midtown PID, $29,770. Senior Citizens Center, $247,217. 4A, $1,789,000, and 4B, $2,127,250. Those two funds are funded by sales tax. We have the Conference Center at $507,712, and we have the Midlothian Development Authority at $20,895,808. And then for a total appropriation of all funds of $79,863,516. Again, this is just a record vote to adopt the budget for fiscal year 2018 and 19, and I'll be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions? I have a motion for approval.
How do you vote?
Yes.
Rogers?
Yes.
McClure?
Yes.
Houston?
Yes.
Frizzell?
Yes.
Kaufman?
No.
Gerard?
Yes.
6-1.
Thank you. We'll move to 2018-318. Consider and act upon an ordinance by record vote of the City Council of the City of Midlothian, Texas, levying and assessing municipal and ad valorem taxes for the City of Midlothian.
And again, this is a record vote, as the mayor read. The total assessed ad valorem tax rate as established by this ordinance that is attached is the .708244 per hundred valuation. This rate represents no change from the current fiscal year's overall tax rate. It's exactly the same as we've had for a number of years. The 2018-2019 tax rate is divided into the two components, as we've discussed before: maintenance and operations, which is .381223, and interest incentive or debt service at .3270121. I'd like to note that section 26.05B of the tax code specifies that a motion to adopt an ordinance or order setting a tax rate that exceeds the effective tax rate must be made in the following form. So I'll ask when someone makes this motion that they specifically say, I move that the property tax rate be increased by the adoption of a tax rate of .708244, which is effectively a 3.75% increase in the tax rate. And that is purely from a result of the valuation and property that is reported that way. So I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have.
I have a question.
Okay.
This is all tied together with the budget.
Yes.
We've already agreed 6-1 to the budget.
Yes.
What I have wrestled with for several weeks now, since I said no a month ago to yes tonight, is that relationship between the budget and the tax rate versus its effective tax rate for several thousand homes, up or down from 363,000. Or we take the difference between the tax rate and the effective rate and use it somewhere else. Am I right in assuming that it's roughly $1 million between effective rate and tax rate?
Yes, that's
okay.
roughly right.
2.5 cents, 370,000 a penny. And it goes out for the math. So the budget is rapidly expanding our first responders, especially in the police department. Is that because of the annexation that we have had to take the existing manpower and spread it out over further? So now we're saying we need to rapidly expand that?
Well, I believe that's a big piece of it. We also are continuing to have new build properties in town. So there's an expanded need for police officers above and beyond just the annexation. But yes, the annexation is a big piece of that.
Okay. And is it any change from this morning that we have 8 police in the queue, and once this gets approved, that we'll put a faster track on all of that and get them into the pipeline? They're already somewhat in the pipeline, but we'll get them aggressively into the pipeline and get them onto the streets before Christmas.
Assuming that they don't fall out in some portion of the remaining process, but yes, we would like to make a push to get not only those 8, but then if this budget gets approved tonight, we will have more that we need to try to fill as quickly as possible, and that's our goal. I've talked to the chief, and our goal is to get the positions filled as quickly as we can, while still maintaining the quality, obviously, of our police force, because we don't want to jeopardize the quality. But we will push as fast as we can to get those positions filled.
The budget, we're talking about the one you're talking about, are in this year's budget or as of October 1?
There's both. There's some that are vacancies in the current budget, and then also some of the new ones that we're talking about tonight.
It's not a police department.
Sure.
Fire department.
Throughout the city.
Yes, I got on that. I'm just wanting to assure myself in this vote and communicate to everybody that's interested that we're not waiting to someday fund this line item of $1.4 million addition to actual, but we're wanting to aggressively get police on the street as quickly as possible. So that the choice now becomes my $94 back to me for my portion of $1 million effective rate versus that predominantly is going to be going towards first responders. There's 3 head count in fire. There's 4 officers. There's 2 sergeants. There's 2 going to schools. So it's heavily funded. The difference between effective rate and proposed rate going towards protection.
Yes,
So it's
the
money
bulk of
versus
it
protection
is for
in my mind.
staffing for public safety.
And we begin this process of setting the next appraisal for next year in January, 4 months from now.
Next budget.
Next budget, yes.
Appraisal.
I'm
We
sorry, I
actually
said that
start
wrong. I said it wrong.
immediately after this, from our part, but.
Okay. And I would definitely want to be heavily involved in that. So, have I got it pretty well framed right? It's boiling down to effective rate is $1 million less divided by 10,000 homes, and or give it to your budget, which is heavily tilted towards an additional coverage of the annexation area and additional coverage of everybody else in town. Is that fair? And the good news about all this, and there is a third aspect to this that probably not everybody knows. We're going to be voting on it later. There is some money that we threw out and talked about just in the last 60 days that is going to go towards 1,500 homes in the possible vote of helping the elderly with their taxes. So all that is dynamics that probably I threw the monkey wrench in when I suggested we put a ceiling and an exemption. And then along with that, threw the real monkey wrench in 30 days ago when I said, can we take another look at all this? I feel, after looking at this from 18 different angles, and talking, and meetings with you, meetings with Chris, meetings with others, that the decision for me is boiled down to, do I want that $1 million difference to go back to everybody at anywhere from $75 to $100, or do I want it to go towards protection for everybody in town? So with that, I appreciate you answering my questions.
I just had a quick question. When you mentioned a moment ago that a proportion of these additional officers that are definitely needed will go to the annexation area, and you also mentioned the balance thereof is needed within town, I would assume that's because of added density in town. In other words, there's new homes being built in town. So because of the density of more people, there would be a rationale of those officers needing because of new homes and new people moving in.
Yes, there's new streets to patrol, there's new areas to cover.
So it's a reaction off of growth.
I would say yes.
Yeah.
I mean, Chris may want to answer
Well,
that.
I think the growth is certainly a factor, and then I think with some of the manpower allocation studies that the police department looked at, there was even a deficit just on existing, residential and commercial in town. So I think we're always a little behind, probably never where we want to be. So I think it's a combination of the two. Certainly, growth plays a major factor when you add annexation, you add all the new businesses and homes that we're adding. But there is a portion of that that's just catching up with what's already existing.
But what are we catching? Would you say we're catching up to already existing past growth?
Yeah, obviously there's been consistent growth. I think you look at the history of this town, there's been growth for years, except for, a short period there during the recessionary periods. But, so yes, obviously growth at some time in the past plays a part in that.
That's all I'm trying to develop within my mind is if the need has been cast from a direct result of growth, whether today or in the past, the growth is causing the need.
Yes, I would. I would agree with that.
Any other questions?
Well, I think in comment to Art's comments about police protection, we had a situation, 3 days ago here, where our officers apprehended 2 people coming out of a house that they'd broken into yesterday. And seeing the press release, neither one of those were Midlothian citizens. So we're having an influx of that type of element because of our growth, because we're starting to be known around the region, and I think they did a great job and need support.
We actually had 2 incidents yesterday. The one you mentioned, there was one later in the evening that we still want to get information on when the completed. But there was 2 incidents yesterday. The other one just briefly resulted in chasing suspects into Cedar Hill. Whether or not that's where they came from, we'll find out later on. But yeah, we are. I think obviously with the increase in residents, but also the increase in retail. Retail certainly brings its own attraction to burglaries, robberies, etc. So there's certainly an increase in calls for service related to the additional retail as well.
And part of this budget is there's 2 additional school resource officers. We had a situation last week where the school had a threat, and we were apprehending the bad guy on that. But I think the resource officers are what we did in the school.
Well, what I wrestled with was, this is going to be the first year with Kroger. I mean, Kroger was there from Thanksgiving on, but now we're going to have it all the way from Panda Express over to Mod's Pizza and all those shops in between. A lot more cars in the parking lot. A lot more bad stuff happens at retail at parking lots at Christmas time. So that's why, specifically this morning, I want to know where in this budget does it fall out? How fast does it get on the payroll? And from this morning's conversation and what's already in the queue, congratulations to the police organization that's already anticipated this budget. Part of this is, it started in January, so there were a lot of anticipations. There were training, there were classes, and there were early on decision making of who's going to be in this queue ready to start after tonight. So it does sound like we've got our ducks in a row ready to go once this happens, if it happens tonight. So that was a very important decision, especially with just looking at the difference between what that center is today versus what it was a year ago. Because there was nothing there a year ago today. There was no cars shopping. There were no cars to worry about. There was no police protection really needed other than construction workers. Total different ballgame this time around, a year later. And that's a big factor.
Chris, one other question I have on retail subject, and granted so, Art, he is correct that was just basically houses there just a couple of years ago where the Kroger is now. Of course, we've been studying this for years, that the retail sector, which we have a proportionality of our residents who want more retail and want more restaurants, and we have a proportion of those residents who also don't care to drive, they don't mind driving 10 minutes to get to retail or restaurant base. But we do also know that the retail that we're referring to, which requires naturally more police force to oversee for safety measures, is a direct result off of growth too. If I'm correct, that is another reactionary mechanism off of growth, which is the retail side, comes from rooftops, which then requires more police officers to oversee it off of another growth impact.
Yeah, I think whether it's residential or maybe even to a greater degree, some of the large retail, all of that growth, all of it demands on services, calls to police. So, yes, I think growth in anything, whether it's residential, commercial, retail, etc., there will be additional demands put on services.
Well, even schools, they're building their schools, so they need the new resources.
And just with the heightened awareness, they're starting to put SROs in schools that didn't have SROs before. So even additional schools, schools that are already in existence, are demanding, additional research.
I'm just having a hard time in my mind with, we can't find $370,000 somewhere else other than police. Obviously, we all want more police, we want more protection. But really, is police the only thing that we could consider cutting in order to lower it?
There's a multitude of things that we could look to cut. I don't want to couch it as that is the only thing in this budget that we can cut. That is,
because I don't want a no vote to be viewed at as anti-police, because it's further from the truth for all of us.
Yeah. Well, it's fire and police, but any budget, in our budget, a payroll is about 70%, which is normal. You take that leaves 30% that's spread out everywhere else.
And that's a continuum.
Sure.
You take out one time, so
My only point is there's other areas that we seem to be harping on one of them.
Once we get into the new process in January, I definitely, maybe I wasn't loud enough or voiced my opinion strong enough to be remembered, but I will certainly work on that between now and next January.
Well, I think staff and the rest of the council, if we find places that we feel like that we can cut the taxes, I mean, I think everybody would want the taxes cut. I would.
I don't know, as I've thought through this over the past week or so, where I was looking for ways to cut the budget, and I could have found ways. I don't know that it's comfortable to do so. I'm looking for a revenue replacer. And rather than fight the budget and talk about whether we're not going to have police or firefighters, I believe the answers to when we're building 500 homes, as I mentioned before, we need $1 million to produce 2.5 cents. So I don't find it that big of a hardship to find it within the fee schedule somewhere for those 500 homes on the growth building side, which everything we've been talking about, just about since we've been moving into this subject right here, where we're trying to figure out how to establish a budget. We're talking about all the pressure mechanisms of growth upon us. So there's no better place to find those dollars than within that. And I think we could have found that this year to make the room. But that being said, that's how I feel.
I understand what you're saying, Mike, and I think when we start the budget next year, getting into it more depth will help us all.
Right.
We understand. But today, I think what the staff is presenting is the only way to go.
And I want to stress, I don't find the budget to be as big an issue as I did previously, as focusing on other capacities and capabilities that we have to entertain those revenue bases than the budget. There's plenty of other places, as I see it.
I move that the property tax rate be increased by the adoption of the tax rate of 70.78244, which is effectively a 3.75% increase in the tax rate.
I second.
How do you vote?
Yes.
Councilmember Rogers?
No.
McClure?
yes.
Houston?
Yes.
Frizzell?
Yes.
Kaufman?
No.
Farrar?
Yes.
Just passed 5-2.
Thank you. We'll move to 2018-319. Consider and take a separate vote to ratify a property tax revenue increase as reflected in the fiscal year 2018-2019 annual operating budget.
This agenda item is one that is required by local government code section 102.007C that requires the city to adopt, when the city is adopting a budget that is going to raise more revenue from property taxes than in the previous year, we have to have a separate vote to ratify that increase. The budget will raise more property taxes than last year's budget by $4,793,562, or 22.42%. And of that amount, $4,091,991 is tax revenue to be raised from new property added to the tax roll this year. So that, just simple math, that means that approximately $500 is from increases in property tax from existing properties. So the notice of the public hearing regarding this fiscal year budget has been published in the Midlothian Mirror on August 16th and 30th, and it has been posted on the city's website as required by the code. Additionally, notice of 2018 tax year proposed tax rate was published in the Midlothian Mirror on August 16, 2018, and it is also posted on the website. Again, the ad valorem rate is 0.708244 in total, and is broken out into NNO and INS, and we just need to conduct a vote to ratify the property tax increase in the amount as presented.
There's no specific language on that?
There is not.
Second.
I have a motion for approval and a second. Record your votes, please. And it does pass 5-2. Thank you. 2018-320, consider and act upon an ordinance of the City of Midlothian, Texas, providing for a $70,000 residential homestead exemption and taxing ceiling for persons 65 years of age and older, and providing an exemption for disabled veterans based upon the degree of their disability.
This particular agenda item has several components, so I'd like to point those out. The first is continuation of the $70,000 homestead exemption for those 65 and older from their ad taxes. We have had that for several years. We also have had the exemption for disabled veterans based on the degree of their disability. That is also being upheld. Then we have added, beginning with tax year 2019 and subsequent years thereafter, a limitation on the total amount of taxes that may be imposed by the city, or more commonly referred to as a tax ceiling, on the homestead of an individual who's 65 years or older. And then finally, just because all of these components are in the same section of our ordinance, we're renumbering the Freeport goods subsection. So that really doesn't have much impact, which is just renumbering. The certified appraisal rolls show that $19,351,296 in assessed value is pertaining to those residents who are over 65, and $38,376,006 is in the assessed value is held by people that are disabled, veteran category. According to the Texas Property Tax Code, I do need to let everyone know that once the city has approved a tax ceiling, they cannot rescind that. So that portion, once established, will be permanent forever. Tax exemptions for the elderly or for the disabled can be affected by a future council action, but the ceiling is permanent once it is done. Just financially, today on the books, we show that combined existing exemption revenue lost for this over 65 and disabled is $1,001,408, and it's estimated by Ellis County that that will increase by $115,686. So our total exemptions revenue lost by the $70,000 is $1,117,094. It's hard to estimate what a ceiling will do because we don't know who will fall into that category or might move, so we have to base it basically on what we have in the rolls right now. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
This ceiling would be on 18 or 19?
2019.
2019, that's whatever tax is in, that's what would be the ceiling?
And that's what I said, next year we should be, the appraisal district will break that number out and we will see, we can add to what the ceiling is. This lost revenue based on the ceiling.
That's the ceiling on appraised value, right?
Ceiling on taxes.
The taxes. Your appraisal, you will still have a market value appraisal that is shown on your taxes. So if your house goes up $20,000, you'll see that market value, but your tax will be
That's what it is currently.
and that's what they'll calculate in how much is lost based on that ceiling in future years, so that we can see what that number is.
And why can't we do it in 2018?
Well, I think it will, because whatever your value is today, the 2019 taxes, that'll be assessed on starting January 1.
January.
We're frozen at this number, but based on what it is today.
Can't go back.
Right. So I think what we're saying is that if whatever your value is right now for this year, that'll be the same tax you have next year for 19.
And the way I understand the ceiling is, if the bottom drops out of the market and all of our appraisals go down, it's not a freeze, it's a ceiling. So that as appraisals go down, taxes for everyone would also go down.
Yes, they will go down, and they can never go,
They
when
never
the market
go above.
rebounds, they can never go up above that ceiling that you set.
It can go down, and then it could eventually come back up, but only to the number.
Only to that number. And the math I did, that's gonna affect 1,500 houses today. Pretty cool.
Is that many of us up there?
I would like to say I did quite a bit of research on this topic, and this, if passed, this is a big deal, and it is, Midlothian would be far and away better than any of our surrounding communities, so kudos to the staff and the council for considering.
I agree with this.
It's a big win for our residents.
I move approval.
I'll second.
I have a motion for approval and a second. Record your votes, please. And it does pass 7-0. Thank you, Ann. We'll move to 2018-321. Consider an act upon a request to allow direct residential driveway access onto Mockingbird Lane from Lot 2, Block A, Seminole Addition.
Thank you, Mayor. Council members. Probably pretty close. So typically when the city gets a driveway access request, this is usually due to new construction. New construction of a residential home. Obviously seeking access to the driveway or to the roadway that's in front of their home. This case is a little different. Our city regulations are very specific in this, in that they state that driveway access is not allowed on residential lots to any major or minor arterial road or any major collector roadway without the approval of this board or city council. In this case, the applicant is requesting a third driveway access point from a tract that currently already contains 2 drive cuts onto Mockingbird Lane. Our thoroughfare plan, and I want to show you up here, our thoroughfare plan does show, or we do classify this roadway as a minor arterial, which is a 4-lane undivided roadway one day in the future. The city ordinance also requires that residential lots with driveway access onto an arterial road, that they provide at least a minimum driveway spacing of 150 feet. So in this particular case, this shows the property in question, 2 existing driveways that are already accessing Mockingbird Lane. This location here to the west would basically show where the applicant is proposing for that third driveway. But obviously, they will be meeting the 150-foot separation distance in the middle, off to the side, be off to the west, not to the east, but this again are already existing driveways that we're looking at there. Now the applicant did provide an overview of his proposal as shown up here on the screen. You can see where the applicant again is proposing to access Mockingbird Lane and how that meanders through his property. There's a couple of culverts, or I guess there's a creek that actually runs through his property where he would be crossing these culverts ultimately to get to the very back of his property to access a new home that the applicant is proposing to build. So although the applicant has stated that the existing path behind his home is too steep for a truck and a trailer to access, and that really only a tractor or maybe a four-wheeler is able to safely access this area behind his home, the applicant does feel that this third access drive is the only safe option to reach the back of his property. This right here kind of shows the area where I think at one time the applicant was using access to get to the very back. But again, very steep terrain from what the applicant has showed us. The applicant did provide these pictures here that you'll see on the screen. I did want to review the next few slides, which also shows this right here is another slide showing how the applicant at one point was trying to access the very back. This slide here shows basically the access point from Mockingbird Lane. Keep in mind, I'm not sure when this gate was actually installed. When you drive on this road, that there is a gate currently there, but really not an existing drive connection that's ever existed. We don't have a record of any type of drive connection. I've gone back, looked at old aerials, have not found that. This right here also showing another view of that drive access point that the applicant's seeking approval on. I threw this picture in here also just to kind of give you an overview again of where the applicant is planning to access. This blue line signifies the creek. These other circles signify those culverts, those culvert crossings. Ultimately, to get to the very back to that proposed barn. Looking at some of these aerials, it looks like at one point the applicants also probably tried to access it on this side as well. But again, the terrain is what the terrain is out there.
Is there a building back there? Is there a building back there now?
Well, the applicant is in the process of building a building back there right now. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It hasn't. I don't believe it's actually been fully built yet. A permit was issued for that building, that accessory building. Or I guess I should say more of a barn. But at this particular point, I don't think that has actually been fully constructed just yet. I wanted to again show another example where we were looking at a little bit earlier. This was the area here where the applicant, I guess at one time, was accessing the back property. You know, could the applicant access maybe here on the side off of this existing drive? I think again, staff's position is really looking at how can we utilize his existing drives to get to the very, very back. The applicant again is very adamant about wanting to get this third drive for the most part. So we did recently find that the applicant has actually already moved forward with installing the driveway within the city's right of way without council's approval. You know, before a contractor is allowed to really work within our right of way or the streets or any easement within the city, you know, obviously a permit must be obtained, and you're obviously supposed to really schedule inspections as well. So, you know, from the picture, I can say that the driveway does not meet any of our requirements as set forth within the city's standard construction details. This would include proper connection to our asphalt road, you know, obviously a concrete approach, which is always required, proper sizing of the culvert. This image, you can also see that there's a pinched culvert, which, believe it or not, recently actually created some drainage issues with the past rains that we just had, this rain event that we just had recently, where water actually backed up onto the roadway, leaving debris in our road. Our Public Works Department did actually go out there and verify that this was recently an issue. So due to the property having 2 existing driveways on the Mockingbird Lane, staff is recommending denial of the proposed request for a 3rd driveway to this single platted lot. And if it is approved, we would like the drive approach to meet all the requirements set forth within our standard construction details, and then also have the driveway placement be approved by our city engineer, who's reviewed by our city department or our city engineering department. Now, at the August 21st P&Z meeting, there were 2 motions that were made. The first was to approve, which received a 3-3 vote. The second was to deny, which also received a 3-3 vote. So the motion failed both ways. I've never seen that before. There's a first. With that, I can take any questions you may have.
Questions?
I've got a whole series. Can you bring the flat back up?
Sure.
Or bring the overhead of the house. That's a good one.
Is this a good one? Sure.
If this gentleman is putting a, I think I'm working. He's got a shop going in somewhere back here, correct?
Yes, sir.
So if he's got a shop like I would have if I had a piece of property that had 700 or 800 foot of frontage, my wife would be ready to wring my neck if I brought a truck or a dump truck or my 18-wheeler, which I own, down that driveway and behind the house anywhere. My wife would be ready to wring my neck the second time if I could even figure out how to get that truck in that driveway through the front yard. So what I'm having a hard time understanding here, if this was in the county, does the county still require 150 foot wide of road frontage to establish a lot for a drive cut?
Yes. Yes. They actually
Okay.
They do.
So in reality, we come into this situation a lot when we annex to where there could be several more drive cuts in here. So what I'm having a hard time understanding, I could get it if this man owned like a little 2.5, 3 acre lot. And he was saying, well, I want another. Not only has he exceeded the drive cut distance almost 2 times over, but he's got 7 acres. There's no way that I see he can bring this in up or around the house. I wouldn't want to dream of limiting a man on a 7 acre piece of parcel by what he could bring in. You can't bring heavy equipment off of your typical 4-inch flat worker. It's going to crack it all up after about 6 months. I'm also wondering, I get what staff is saying that we already have 2 entrances here, but it really is a circle drive, which doesn't, I guess you could call it 2 entrances. On a circle drive, to me, it's kind of a little different. It's kind of, it's 2 entrances serving one purpose, like one destination point. So I'm looking at a whole rash of, and I understand staff's position on the culvert and the crushed concrete. I can't speak for the applicant, but my only gut would be that he's trying to get rolling on his building in the back. He's in hopes that he's going to be able to get through there. And he's gone ahead and put something in that will drain a little water but allow equipment to bring materials in so he can at least keep starting or get started while we're all going through this 2 or 3 month process while he's waiting. That's my guess. I can't take that.
Very possible. Very possible.
This to me is a no-brainer on a 7 acre lot. To me.
Yeah, and I think staff's position when we look at this, obviously we go by what our subdivision regulations are saying we need to follow. So again, I think this picture here says a lot. Also, I think showing exactly the distances it's, twofold. Obviously, you've got more than 150 feet in separation, and you're talking about a 7-acre tract of land.
And I can think of just up around the corner as you go up Mockingbird towards Jennifer Lane and some of those areas.
Sure.
We've got drive access points every 150 foot to 200 foot up there as you approach Shallow.
Right.
So I think it's going to end up a lot better situation than it could be had it been annexed and grandfathered in with the culvert and the rock base versus he's going to be forced to put in a concrete entry there.
Approach, yes, sir. And I would just say to council, I mean, subdivision regs are specific that if you're at a major collector or an arterial, you have to get council permission to get direct driveway access. And the concern that we have on our end, this I have my end, is, I mean, the way this is designated right now is at some point, it's going to be a 4-lane divided roadway. So it's divided, not undivided. So when you put that median in, anybody that went to the TxDOT meeting on 1387, and you heard property owners that were saying, man, you took away my access. You didn't give me a median opening. You don't have one plant here. My concern is, again, a couple things. One is this is not lined up with an existing driveway. That's okay. But when you start coming in and you start building a 4-lane divided roadway, or we downgrade it and we make it 4-lane undivided, which is what we did on Mount Zion. But staff needs some direction then from a standpoint of if we're going to go ahead and allow the driveways on roads, then we might need to bring them down from divided or undivided. I'm sorry, from divided to undivided, just so that when the road does become a project, and at some point Mockingbird will become, I mean, when Mockingbird gets extended down to 1387 to Hayes, this will become a project at some point. We just, again, someone's going to be battling with the residents of who gets median openings, where do they get them, and the concern is if this stays divided, you have somebody who's trying to bring in big equipment, more likely you're not going to get a median opening right here. How safe is it to come in and bring a big piece of equipment, trying to do a big U-turn, at a median opening and swing back around if there's even room to do that? And again, I was at that meeting. I know Councilman Farrar was there. I know the mayor was there, and there were a lot of upset folks that are saying, "Hey, you're making this a divided, ultimately a 6-lane divided roadway, and you're looking to take away my access. What am I going to do?" And that's my concern. That's the reason why when we look at it on the staff side of it, we really are trying to limit, not trying to limit access to people's property. I understand that. We're just trying to limit something in the future, because it will be an issue in the future that somebody, maybe it won't be me, but somebody will be looking at trying to figure out how do we allow access to these homes when we have a project that is called for doing, the median. So,
Mike, would you prefer, I mean, let's say it got approved, obviously from a planning standpoint, the roadways, it'd be better if he lined up with that existing, is that what you're saying? It'd be better if he lined up with that existing drive across the way, you have one control, because we typically like them across from one another.
yeah, and anytime we can line up driveways, I mean, whether it's a commercial, retail, or residential, it sure works better just because you have one less conflict. When we look at, again, kind of what our standards are, when you have divided roads, it's 600-foot median opening. So you're not going to put a median every 300 feet typically. It's 600 feet. So when you start looking here, this is good from a driveway, but when you start adding the median into effect, at some point, well, there's going to need to be a median opening somewhere, because you can't completely block somebody off. And so again, that's kind of what we struggle with. I struggle with in looking at the road classifications and then getting drive access. You're exactly right, Councilman Rogers. McAlpin's a great example. McAlpin is shown to be a 90-foot. I don't know how we're going to do that when it comes time, because you have driveways probably every 120 feet, 125, 150 feet. And it just more likely that road will get downgraded to being 4-lane undivided versus divided.
We may have to do that to Mockingbird, Mike.
Yes, sir.
We may have to just go ahead and bite the bullet on that and downgrade it, because even after you turn the corner and start back to the north, you've got driveways just everywhere.
And that's been downgraded. I believe it's an 80-foot going north and south.
So that wouldn't be a median.
That would be a median on that same.
So then why would we need a median just between Walnut Grove and the corner?
I think part of what this was looked at again was, number one, there wasn't that much development on it, so you can't control where the driveways are going, because once you get around the corner and you start going up, those are already in place. They're already there. The other thing is this. I can't remember if I believe this is a 90 coming down. I believe we had this as a major arterial. Or a minor arterial coming up into a minor arterial that goes to a major arterial. So again, the thinking was just, if you had a bill, this is 80 all the way down. So the thinking is, where you have, and what we tried to look at is where we have a lot of existing development, a lot of existing homes, if we can downgrade it, then we would, and that way we'd have the 4-lane undivided versus divided. This segment didn't have nearly as many driveways as when you started going up to the north.
Remind me again about that 1387 access. It's gonna go up by that housing addition, that
Let's,
split last year.
I hate to say this, but let's stay with the item that we have.
Well, it is. I'm trying to figure out how much traffic is gonna be on that area coming up from the 1387 by that housing. Isn't there a housing addition that was just?
Yes, there's
approved by
one that's
Mockingbird?
right at there. Yes, and they also currently have, Mockingbird Springs.
Okay, so then that road is planned eventually to come back down to 1387, right?
Correct, yes, right here.
So it's the same thing. That's what we're
Yeah,
talking
no,
about, is the
you're
traffic
right.
flow that's going to eventually be on that section of road.
On the new section.
Both, they turn to go, back to Walnut Grove, where else would they go?
With the middle school, you know, depending on how things are set up, I mean, if folks are still continuing to go to the middle school here in Walnut Grove, then you'll still have a lot of trips that will be coming using Mockingbird.
Right.
You know, to get to the middle school or where the elementary school, I'm not sure where that boundary will be. The schools really, a lot of times dictate traffic flow. I mean, we'll see that on 14th Street when the school builds, you know, the elementary on 14th Street. Traffic flow is going to change, you know, pretty dramatically.
So Mike, if I can understand you, and I must confess, I was fortunate enough to serve on planning and zoning, and then been on council. This will be my 3rd term. And I had just always taken it for granted that you got some type of a cut into that property every 150 to 200 feet. It turns out that my assumption was wrong. It sounds like that this gentleman owns nearly 700 foot of road frontage, and if we were able to arrange this in the fashion we prefer, he would only get one cut in 700 feet. Is that the way our current regs work?
Well, the way that the subdivision regs read right now is any access to anything that's a major collector or above needs to get council authorization. So any driveway access, not a road, but driveway access, that needs to get council authorization.
Okay, so
He would actually
I understand.
because he has 2, and this would be the 3rd.
I look at the first 2 as a 1, but I get it.
Does the county allow, my clarification, does the county allow every 150 feet even on one property? They don't care as long as they're spread out 150 feet.
I don't know if they limit it to just one drive cut. I mean, I know, I'd have to look at the county regs.
The closest you can put in the county is 150 feet.
Yeah.
Now, if it's a continuous property.
I don't know if they address it. I don't know if they address that in the county regs.
But I think you're probably right that a lot of things have changed in the county as of recent. So,
But just based on what you were saying earlier, I mean, I don't know how, you know, if a person has 700 feet, can they just line up a bunch of drives?
Right.
Yeah. But, I mean, he does have an avenue, which is obviously why we're here, and that is to request this governing body to say yes or no.
And I will admit that I think it is safest for it to be approached in how it's being done. So I think it's a good idea. I was just surprised that you could have that much frontage and you could have a council that could say, no, you're not going to get to do it.
It's based on the classification of the road. If there's a local street, as long as you're meeting that, the 150, 125, would be an issue.
Actually, I had a lot, and I had a comment in the county, and they did tell me that every 150 feet, if you're gonna make a driveway cut, it has to be a separate.
So it's one drive per
150.
It could be 200 feet, but.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But just one per property.
Yeah.
One per property.
Any other questions?
Where I'm struggling with this is that obviously we have many roads in this town that we clog up by allowing, accesses, and so I think it's not just an easy decision. It's not a no-brainer for me.
If it were 300 foot wide, I could get it. But because we're talking 700 feet, that's where I'm having a problem that a person can own 7 acres and they've got a house that's on the high portion of the property, and and they want to have a shop which is in the back corner, which makes perfect sense to me. That's where my wife would definitely put me. I'd probably be living there. That they would have an access point further down.
Well, I'm assuming that they have been using that truck that used it.
Probably living there with no access.
Fix it up the middle. But the whole point is that I just can't imagine the access by the house with trucks rolling by the house and right behind the backyard.
Isn't that the way they have been accessing?
Well, because they haven't, I'm guessing they haven't had the culverts.
She must like it.
Well, I got a feeling she finally put her foot down and said either get the other gate put in or you're moving out.
Yeah, I mean, there's you can see an existing culvert here. There's a drive path here, and then I looked at, just other aerial photography that we have access to for presentations and so on and so forth. There's an existing culvert crossing point right about here also. So
They have been using that route.
they've been using that, right? They've been using that either as they were using that when they were accessing on this side, they would use that culvert and they would use this crossing here.
I guess my question would be if I brought my 1-ton truck with a 40-foot gooseneck trailer through that gate on the we're looking at the north side, which isn't north, how would I even get it in the gate or down there?
Well, I think that's essentially what he's saying.
Yeah, you can drive a pickup truck the way they've been going, or a 4-wheeler, but you can't use that as a shop.
Well, the issue that I have is I think it should be the drive, if we should permit it, I would want the drive aligned with the drive on the other side of the street because of the cut. And before it's permitted and he's allowed to go further, he needs to put the right culvert in and he needs to put the concrete approach. And I don't know if we deny that until he gets that done or.
Well, we were in the process of sending a violation letter.
But I think if the council approves that says, we can put standards on it. We can say it's got to meet our concrete standard, our culvert standard, and that it align with the other drive entrance. I think we can take that as stipulations to.
Well, you can make that as a motion.
What serves that other drive? Is there a residence at the end of that other drive?
No, sir. Actually, are we talking about
The one that goes to the left.
Yes, sir. Absolutely, there's a residence.
There's a residence up there, so the likelihood of that other drive going away is not very great.
Right.
So, I was gonna say, if we're forced to line up with the other drive go away, well, that's not the drive.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Right there.
It's this one right here.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yes, that's
We'd have to want that cut anyway.
Let's go back and I'll make that a motion that it aligns with the other drive on the other side of the road and that he does the approach and culvert according to city codes.
So it's a permit.
Right.
I'll second that.
So I have a motion and a second, so that would be a yes.
Yes with conditions.
Yes with conditions. Okay, record your votes. Okay, and it does pass 7 with those conditions. Okay, we'll move to 2018-322, consider and act upon an agreement for professional services with Freeze and Nichols.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. If you recall at last week's special call council meeting, Tom Booth with Freeze and Nichols presented the results of the water supply and demand study that was undertaken last year. And as a result, in looking at it, there's some expansions that are needed at the water treatment plant, as well as looking at long-term water supplies. And what we had before you, this item was discussed and presented to the Utility Advisory Board back in August. And it's based on really looking at doing the assessment of the existing plant, when I say existing, the Kingman plant, but more so looking at the initial expansion of the Auger plant, the newer plant, and coming in and adding additional membranes, but also looking at, because once that expansion is done, it's not going to be too much longer before we have to do an additional expansion. So do we continue to expand the Auger plant, which is a membrane facility, or there is an option of looking at the Kingman plant as well get some additional water rights, through the Mount Creek system and expand the containment plant. What I've asked is Scott Cole with First and Nichols, if he would just, it's outlined for you in your agenda item here, but I asked Scott had presented they had a presentation that First and Nichols did at the Utility Advisory Board that kind of goes a little more detail in regards to what this assessment will do, and then after that, we have to answer any questions that you may have.
Mike, this doesn't include the upgrade of the water line, the raw water pipeline out of Joe Pool, does it?
No, sir, but they'll be looking at the assessment of what it will take on the payment side, and it looks like we don't need to do any upsizing of that pipeline.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what they're doing.
Well, Mr. Mayor, council staff, appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm Scott Cole, Freese and Nichols. We've got a very brief presentation. Just wanted to step you through kind of what the scope of what we're going to be looking at as part of this study. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask along the way. Just real quick, I want to talk a little bit, a reminder about our existing water plants, summary of our treatment needs. You all heard from my colleague Tom Gooch last week about the future water supply and water treatment needs. And just want to refresh our memory on that and then go over a little bit what our goals for this project are. So if you remember, your auger plant, treatment plant number 2, this is your membrane plant. Right now, we have a total capacity of about 8 million gallons per day, and a firm capacity with one of the membrane racks out of service of about 6 million gallons per day. And this is the primary focus of this study we're going to look at. We're going to look at both plants, but this is the opportunity to have the most cost-effective expansion in water treatment capacity at the auger plant. Treatment plant number 1, which is the Taman plant, 11.5 million gallon per day capacity. It could be expanded up to 20 million gallons per day, but as you mentioned, likely requires some pipeline improvements to enable that to happen. So, hitting briefly on what Mr. Gooch presented to this group last week at this time, the water supply study identified some water treatment expansion needs, and the auger water treatment plant, or treatment plant 2, is the best set up for a fast deployment and your most cost-effective expansion of treatment capacity by adding additional membrane racks at that facility. And we also want to take a look at the Taman plant. Since it is an older facility, part of this is going to be looking at that plant to see if, with some very minor modifications, if we could increase the capacity of that plant as well in a cost-effective manner. So some of the project goals that we listed here is to look at both plants. However, the auger plant, or treatment plant number 2, is going to be the primary focus, and determine exactly what the expansion is going to look like there, and not only on a short-term but also long-term build-out of that facility. And then also look at the Taman plant and look at some, are we able to do some minor modifications to maximize our existing infrastructure there and increase the treatment capacity as well. So looking at our project schedule proposed, you can see the timeline here. I don't want to go into a whole lot of detail, but really with the amount of time it takes to do the preliminary design, detailed design, and get state approval from TCEQ, we're looking at a likely scenario of late summer of 2020 when that expansion would be online and essentially complete and in service. And so, it's a timeline that's a little over 2 years from right now, but then that allows you to have the additional capacity to meet the projected demands that we talked about last week. The scope of this study is divided up into these tasks, and you can see, we're going to do some site visits, get a handle on what the existing infrastructure looks like, and also look at both treatment plants and really develop a preliminary engineering design report for expansion of the auger plant, treatment plant 2. And that will, in the future, subsequent effort could be a detailed design and construction like we saw on the previous project schedule slide. So that's just a brief summary of our preliminary design study, and we're here to answer any questions that you guys might have.
Any questions? I'll make a motion that we approve with the recommendations that the UAB gave us.
Second.
Record your votes, please. And that's passed 7-0. Move to 2018-323, consider an action upon the bid award to Circle H Contractors LP for Ledgestone Lane roadway improvement project.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This item has been in the works for some time. I mean, I
Yeah,
went
it took
back.
a long time, Mike.
Went back and started really doing some research and looking at it, and when you go back, I mean, the preliminary, the original alignment study was done back in 2006, 2007. We acquired the 1 acre property there that had the manufactured home on it back in 2008. We acquired a little bit of property to the north through a reservation, and then an actual acquisition, which was the property right in through here. So we really, again, that's going back. I mean, we're looking at 10, 11, 12 years ago. The school is funding that cost 100%. The school is also partnering with us on the 2 lanes that get back to this segment right in through here of Ledgestone Lane that tie into the 4-lane segment there that was built. But it looks like that's going to be reduced now to maybe $75,000, and we'll be bringing that back to council for consideration at a later date. But what you have before you here again is, you know, the project when it was originally conceived was, you know, basically 2 lanes tying in, and it was going to stop right here. The other 2 lanes is through an agreement with this development. You know, would have hopefully been in place. And there would have been 2 lanes going through, then the school would have come, you know, a little bit later. The school actually has come faster than what was originally anticipated by a year. And so, which makes sense. We're glad we're able to do this together because it makes for a much better project. But what we're looking at doing really is coming off of Plainview with a 4-lane divided section, which would really be the ultimate section at that intersection in that area, and then transitioning down to the existing lanes that are there now that go through Plainview Manor, and then coming back up from those 2 lanes into a 3-lane segment here, and then going from that 3-lane transitioning down to the 2 lanes, and then tying into the existing road that's there. So, in an effort, you know, there's a big crossing that we have right here, and we actually had an alternate bid. The base bid included a big concrete arch structure that was going across this area. We also put in an alternate bid for coming in with box culverts. After going through and looking at it, and I'll just tell you from a standpoint of on the public works side, you know, we have great folks that really, I mean, they're team players that we started looking at it, and it was really hard to kind of grasp some of the costs that we were looking at, and so staff's recommendation is go through and we have a change orders being proposed, and we would take the structure out completely, and then we would self-perform. So we would purchase the structure, and in talking to our public works director and his crews, we believe we could put that structure in ourselves and save the city considerable money on this project. And so that's what the goal is. Again, when you talk to Adam, you talk to his folks, they're like, hey, we can do it. And talking to one of the manufacturers, there's 2 local, when I say local, there's one in Mansfield that make the structures, there's one in the DFW area as well. And talking to the one, they basically told us that 80% of the installations that they're seeing are self-performed by either the county, the city, or whoever the local government entity is on those structures. And so it's going to be looking at it's going to be a steel arch structure that won't have a bottom. We'll use the existing channel bottom of the foundations that will be on. And again, this is a little unique that we're doing here, but again, the intent is really to try to keep the cost down and do that as a self-performing thing. And so, with that, if you have to answer any questions the council may have.
How much will that save us about?
Mayor, we're shooting for at least 150, but we think we may be able to do better than that.
Sounds good. What kind of structure is it?
It's going to be a steel arch structure. And so what it is the original that was in the bid was a concrete arch structure. This one is actually going to be a corrugated steel structure to where it'll span that opening. So it'll basically be an arch structure that the opening is roughly going to be about 40 feet in width. And depending on, we actually are going to have that going out to bid on Thursday this week, so that we'll get unit pricing. Depending on what the unit pricing is, I'd like to try to extend it as far as we can, and we may be able to eliminate some guardrails and other things on the project, which will reduce the cost, but also make it a little bit safer in that area and have less maintenance in the future. And again, I take my hat off to Adam and his crews, because anytime we have anything that is unique and that is a challenge, they're up for it. And again, they're looking at basically what's best for the city. and the citizens. And so again, I appreciate them stepping up on that.
So that area will stretch by the new middle school, it's gonna be 3 lane, you said?
Yes, sir.
And then further down south, it's gonna be 4 lanes.
Yes, sir.
Are we going to, how long will 3 lanes last us before we need to make it 4 lanes?
Across the school side of things? It's really going to depend upon kind of what the patterns are. With Miller here, Miller's still going to be accessed off of Sept. So now, the one thing the school is doing, they are extending Sunbeam from, I don't think I have it on the aerial, but they are extending Sunbeam from Sept back here. And so that's going to provide for a great connection between the 2 roadways, so that if you're bringing your kids, you know the ability to come back without having to go all the way down to Mount Zion and back around, or go all the way back down to Ashford and come back around to this direction.
I would assume that all those fields are gonna turn into houses very quickly because of the middle school and the elementary school pretty close to them.
You know, this right here, we actually own. This is city property. This is Mark's property right here. And that was done through a swap with the school district. That was part of the school's property here. With the school fronting, which it really is, it's a good setup with the school fronting the middle school on a completely separate road from Sept, but they do have interconnectivity between the 2 with gates. It'll allow for overflow parking when they have events. With the elementary school, you don't typically have the same time as you have them with your middle schools.
I'm just trying to understand the difference between a 3 lane farther up and then a 4 lane farther south. Why not a 3 lane south?
And Councilmember, we can do that again. The one thing that I've always tried to do is this really is looking at getting into the ultimate section here. Again, you'll have the ability to turn and go Ashford if you're going to go, going back towards Sept. You have the ability to go straight. It can be reduced, but I'll give you an example. Right now, Walnut Grove Middle School, it's functioning fairly well off of a 3 lane road. It's been like that since it was built. And I think that school's at least 10 years, if I remember right.
Yeah.
Roughly. So really, it's going to really depend upon kind of what's happening. And there's still development that can occur to the south. Again, don't know what's going to happen when the school builds the school on 14th Street, how that's going to change. You know, I'm not sure if anybody back in this area that's now going to LaRue may go to that 14th Street school. So traffic patterns will change, but we'll definitely keep an eye and monitor them. We also, when we came back and did the change or the amendment to the engineering services agreement to add in that 3rd lane, we had discussed with council that we would look at making this an undivided section. It's basically slated to be it was slated to be a 4-lane divided segment, but to come in and try to do 3 lanes divided, 2 lanes on one and a divided, and then have the median with the school side of things. And at that time, council authorized us to treat that basically as ultimately it's going to be an undivided segment through. And really, that's what you would see through here if this were to ever get expanded.
When are we going to drop down there and work on that get you?
There's a couple things we're looking at within this project itself. The school is participating with us as well. There will be a left turn lane that'll be built, so there'll be a through lane coming through here. But when you get down, now this was brought to the bond steering committee as a potential bond project to do that segment of Mount Zion, and it was not included on that as an eligible project. So it wasn't whittled down to make the short list. And so really that segment of Mount Zion between Sept and Creek Bend going back is going to basically remain as it currently is. What we are going to look to try to do, I think we can do this internally in-house, would be also to try to come in and do a auxiliary or free right turn lane, so that when you're on Mount Zion, if you're heading eastbound, you know to turn and go Ledgestone.
And I think, Mr. Sibley, I think we're going to, like Mike has stated, in time when that middle school opens and traffic patterns change, probably looking at that area, and if it's problematic, we're going to be back in front looking at that as a long-term capital project likely to expand that roadway. But it did not make, like Mike said, it did not make the short bond proposition.
What goes south, is that on that 4 lane? What road is that?
This is Plainview. We're talking about getting
So Plainview going all the way to...
This goes all the way to McAlpin, and it actually goes through down.
Probably one of these days,
It'll go all the way
it'll be 4 lanes,
to
so, I mean, you'd want to go ahead and start building it now. And that needs to be one of the next projects.
Well, we bought that land, what, 2 years ago or 3?
This part right here?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. I think that's 2016. Yes, sir.
Mike, is it going to be 3 lane across that culvert area.
We actually are putting that right now. We're doing 4 lanes on that little segment of it. We're putting the culvert in, so it'll be for the alternate
So we're
segment.
gonna go 4 lanes there and then transition to 3 lanes.
But it'll be striped, so it's really gonna be just set up so it's, and the reason why we did that, Mayor Pro Tem, is it has curb inlets on that segment because that's gonna be the low point. And so it's better to go ahead and build it and put them out because you put them on the outside of the road. And so we could have done it and narrowed it down, but then in the future we would just be knocking them out and having to rebuild them. So from a striping standpoint, the striping will work. It may look a little unusual just because of the configuration going from 3. It'll actually go to 4, but the striping will take it as a 3-lane road. When actually it transitions down, this is a 31-foot flat section that was built by the developer of Plainview Manor.
It's 31 foot.
Yes, sir. And basically you just have 2.
That's a 2-lane.
That's
Are
a
we
2
going
lane.
to strike that at all, or have you planned?
We hadn't planned on it. We could if we need to. I mean, the big reason that we're doing this, well, of course, with the turn lanes and everything here, but we can look at doing that as well.
I've had a request to say that really don't want more traffic.
Sure.
Sunbeam is going to be a public road. It's
Yes,
not
sir.
going to be part of the school.
It'll be a public road. That is correct. Yes, sir.
Big 2-lane road.
They're actually right now. It's on a thoroughfare as a major collector. The school district is going to come back and ask that get downgraded to a minor collector, which would be 3 lanes, which will allow for the turns at their drive.
Turn into their drive.
Yes, sir. They do have access coming off to the side as well.
It's only 2 lanes on the other, to the west or whatever direction.
Yeah, it just dead ends. It goes to a cul-de-sac. Yeah, that's just it's the old county road.
They'll put that addition in as a 3-lane through their property there.
That's correct.
Will that become city owned?
Yes, it will. It'll become a public road.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
We probably need to get another one. What we're talking about. So Ledgestone Lane, 323. Do we have any more questions or motions?
I'll motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion to approve and a second. Record your votes. And best pass 7-0. We'll move to 2018-324. Consider and act upon a third amendment to the agreement for the sale and delivery of treated water to Sardis Long End Water Supply Corporation.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This item is the third amendment to the agreement that we have with Sardis that was entered into in 2015. We've had 2 subsequent amendments to the agreement. This one was based on Sardis' request, which is looking to have, and right now we have an emergency interconnect between their Mockingbird site and our Mockingbird Tower site as well. So if we ever in an emergency, we can provide water to one another in another spot. We can do the same thing down south there by Lake Grove. The way the agreement is structured is that right now the minimum that Sardis is required to take is 250,000 gallons a day. They can go up to 1 million gallons a day is the maximum. And after 5 years, that minimum goes to 500,000 a day, and the maximum stays at 1 million. So that million stays consistent. What Paul Tischer, the general manager, he wanted to be able to utilize that water throughout the year, and he was a little concerned that when they get to the 500,000, there may be days when he can't take it all at Lake Grove, so that they're not taking more than the 1 million a day, which is what the contract provides for. With that, they have finished.
Do we have meters on that connection?
There's meters right now, but they're actually going to come in and change it out and go with our standard at this point. Before, it was just because if it was an emergency, we just wanted to have some way to kind of meter what's being there.
Is it metered out at Lake Grove?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Any more questions?
Approve as presented, Mayor.
I'll second that. Record your votes, please. And it does pass 7-0. We'll move to 2018-325. Consider and act upon a resolution authorizing the expenditure in the amount of $514,800 by the Midlothian Community Development Corporation to fund half of the cost of the field use agreement with MISD and the purchase of accessible playground equipment for various city parks.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. What this is tonight is I'd like to present to you Midlothian Development Corporation, Community Development Corporation, requested of the Parks Department, specifically Mr. Barnes, to go and seek out accessible playground furniture. You know, we've had some at Hawkins Springs Park, it gets vandalized, something like that, so they wanted to search and find some other equipment where we could spread it throughout other parks. So Brad went and found some accessible furniture, well, not furniture, but playground equipment to the point of about $45,000. That's swing sets and freestanding play pieces that will go in Hawkins Springs, Kimball Park, Ridgeview, and community parks. The Midlothian Community Development Corporation did approve up to $45,000 for that expenditure. Brad has found it for about $38,000 and change. That's shipping included. We'll be able to install that ourselves. So that is the first item of interest within this agenda item. The second agenda item is, if you recall, the council requested that staff go to the Midlothian Community Development Corporation and seek their participation in the $939,000 and change turf fields that the Midlothian Independent School District were putting in. They're putting them in at Walnut. They pretty much put them in at Walnut Grove as well as Frank Seal Middle School. Those are going to be mainly used for youth soccer as well as youth football for the city of Midlothian. The fields are in. They're still putting in stands, concession stands, bathrooms, and things like that. We met with them, Midlothian School District last week. They said we'd be able to access those for these practices and youth games about the middle of October, October 15th. So, but nonetheless, Midlothian Community Development Corporation did okay to pay for half of those fields, and that is to the tune of about $469,800. So that is half of what the city had promised to pay Midlothian Independent School District. So those are to the tune of $514,800. So with that, I'll answer any questions that y'all may have.
Any questions?
I would like to add just one thing. I think the $45,000 they went ahead and approved. They did ask us, if I'm not mistaken, to look at some additional wheelchair accessible swings.
Yes, sir.
And
yes,
so
sir. I'm sorry.
you might see once we get back with the B Corporation, you might see another request coming forth if they approve those expenditures. Yes, sir.
Any other questions?
Wait a second.
I second. Oh, is this second? I'm sorry.
Somebody please second.
No, it was, he did.
Thank you all very much.
All right, thank you. We'll move to 2018-326. Consider an act upon the rejection of bids received August 9, 2018 for the construction of the City of Midlothian Fire Department training facility.
Mayor and Council, we're asking you tonight to reject the bids that we received on August the 9th for the Fire Department training facility. After those bids were received, the cost to build that facility, we felt like at this time was a little high, not knowing what the site and infrastructure costs are going to be for the actual area itself. So what we're asking is for you to reject that. That allow us to evaluate the size and scope of the training facility, as well as we're in the process of sending out bid requests for site work. So October the 9th, we should be able to open up the bids for site work and infrastructure costs for the area, and that will give us a lot better idea of the size and scope that we need to reevaluate and put on that area or in that area. So,
thank you.
I'll answer any questions if you have.
Questions?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Is this part of the bond package or is this separate?
It is a part of the bond package, yes.
Any other questions?
We're going to approve rejection.
Second. Record your votes, please.
Thank
you. And it does pass 7-0. Thank you. We only have one other item, it's 2018-328.
Nah, let's go do that.
I'll make that motion.
All right. We don't even have to vote on it. We are adjourned.